They said it couldn't be done, and yet here we are, despite the odds, or as Phil Collins says, against all odds. And for those of you who don't know Phil Collins, you do. And if you don't know Against All Odds, it's his saddest song. You should go listen to it. Welcome to the stream, live on GitHub Education. Of course, this episode's about Phil Collins, as you can tell. We're here to talk for the third time on the third episode about open source as an alternative to an internship, because it's that time of year. Students are getting ready for their summer internships, and for the past few months when I've been talking with students, they have been a little worried, a little nervous. Is this the right internship? Am I going to get the right experience here? What if they're mean to me? What if the other interns make fun of me? It's a lot of those same like first day of school worries. But the good news is that you don't have to get an internship in order to work in tech. And you don't have to get an internship at the perfect place. And in fact, the opportunities that internships provide, which are networking and practical job skills and working on a real team in the way that real teams do it, all of that experience is actually available in another place that doesn't involve having to move to another city and stay at your aunt's place or a family friend and meet a bunch of new people and have to work in an office and all that kind of stuff. You can get a lot of that same experience in open source. And I'm no expert, but I do have an expert with me today, and her name's Bekah from OpenSauced, and she's here to tell us all about today's topic, which is contributor to maintainer, because we've been talking all about contributing to open source, but there's a whole nother world of open source when you become a maintainer. Some say a much more stressful world.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, PJ. I'm glad to be here again and wrapping this up talking about being a maintainer, because I think that, it really shows the journey and all of the things that you're able to do and allows you to, up a lot of those skills that you need when you're applying for a job.
Exactly. And especially showing that move on a resume from, I was contributing, and then I became a maintainer. I don't know someone who's going to look at a resume for someone, especially if they're a little younger, and see that they were a maintainer of an open source project and be like, nah, not this person. At the very least, I'm open to considering that person if the skills align,
Yeah, I love it. And I think that there's a lot of things that you can detail to show like, hey, I've done a lot of work. Look how many forks I have on my project. Stars are kind of a vanity metric, but it also indicates like people are looking at your project and they're interested in it. And so all of these different things can help us to look and see that, all right, it's not just this person says they're an open source maintainer because they have an open project, but they're putting in the work, they're putting it out there, and people are engaging with them. And that's a huge part of it.
I guess, am I technically an open source maintainer because I have one of those magic 8-ball apps in Python on my GitHub repo? Does that
a Python
count?
Maintainer. There you go.
I'm just going to throw it on my resume and see what happens. Oh, Lord, please, no. I'm a terrible Python writer. Don't look at any code I've ever written, please and thank you. So, Bekah, this journey, it seems kind of hard to be a maintainer. Like everything I've ever read about open source, anything I've ever seen about open source, it all comes from a place of empathy for the maintainer because of how difficult that job is. The only place I don't usually see empathy for the maintainer is in issues when they're tagging the maintainer and going, hey, you haven't fixed this in 24 hours. What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a real challenge. And I think that it just depends on how you interact with people, the things that you have set up. So there are definitely things that you can do to improve your experience as a maintainer. You don't have to jump in and say I have to be perfect at all of this, or I have to have everything set up. There are basics that you can have set up, and then you just work your way to more advanced things and deeper understanding. You don't have to have a GitHub action created when you create your repository. Will that be helpful to you as you move forward? It depends on your project, but probably. I know we lean on them pretty heavily at OpenSauced, and we also use them to help connect our contributors to other projects as well. And so is it something that I could do manually? Sure. But does it save me time as a maintainer? Yes, but I didn't need that from the moment I started the project. So I think that it's good to start with the perspective of let's go simple and let's build on all of these skills, because ideally that's what you're doing when you're learning new things anyway. I have this blog post that just went live a little bit ago, and I mentioned a specific maintainer that I talked to. So the maintainer from Hopscotch, Leas Thomas, I spoke with him a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying how initially he started this open source project because he had a pain point and he wanted to add to his resume. But now he's the CEO of this company that has backing from some really big places. And so I just love this story. You know, he started small and then he just progressed with the project. And I think, you know, it's my hope that everybody can have an experience that doesn't feel overwhelming, that feels as positive as the one that he shared with me.
Yeah, it's really easy to have like a negative experience when you're first trying something new and when you're setting this stuff up. And to like your very first point, do you need a robust suite of GitHub Actions just to get started? No, but you do find these, these pieces of actions that people have done in other places and elsewhere that helps make your life a lot easier. And maybe it's only saving a minute or two here. Maybe it's only saving like a little bit of time, but over time that adds up. And now when you've got less manual work to do, you can focus on the fun stuff of building.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love for you to maybe like walk us through a few points about this blog, because this maintainer course, I was looking at it before the show and I was crazy impressed and with the thought and detail that went into it. And I think it's really going to help a lot of people who are either thinking of becoming maintainers or are already maintainers and are like, man, how do I do this? So we should just go right in and either check out the course or the blog. I'm totally fine with either of those because that's a great idea.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and get started with looking at the course, because I think that this is a great way to kind of walk through what we're doing. In the blog post is just kind of like, hey, you know, the world essentially runs on open source. 90% of companies use open source software, but there's not that much support for new maintainers out there. Like, how do you learn to become a maintainer? And so for us, it was really important to say, like, all right, if we want this, if we want our future to be innovative, if we want it to solve problems, then we have to support maintainers. And that should happen all across where maintainers are, but let's start at the beginning too. So let me talk. I can talk through this course. So this is our second course that we've launched at OpenSauced. And actually, like, this is a pretty big announcement because we haven't announced it yet. So you heard it here first.
World premiere.
It is OpenSauced Launch Week, which we are calling Lunch Week, begins today. So we're very happy to be lunching with all of you.
Bekah, I need to know who came up with him, and I'm going to give him $5 next time I see it. Was it you? Are you about to get $5?
I'm nearly positive that it was B. Dougie. You know, he's on point with the food branding for OpenSauced.
All right, B. Dougie, you get $5 from me the next time I see you for that amazing, amazing pun.
Yeah, so lunchtime is launch time at OpenSauced, and this is day one of our launches. And today we are launching our Intro to Maintainer course. So it is lunchtime where I am on the East Coast, and we'll be doing a separate stream from this one right after on YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. So you can catch us talking more about the course there as well. Should I share my screen, PJ? What do you think is the best way to? Or we just
sharing your screen and showing off the pieces that we're talking about would be dope. That'd be perfect.
Okay, let me remember how to share my screen.
Oh man.
Technology
well,
is hard.
It's always difficult, but I'm looking at like even just your YouTube live, and you have a lot of like things coming up. Like you're doing a lot this week.
We are streaming every single day this week. So new blog posts every day, live streams every day. Wow. And we have a couple of additional things. Like John is doing a webinar for Timescale on Wednesday. So
Okay.
we're really, leaning into this lunch that's happening.
That's right. It's a pretty good lunch as far as I can tell. 5 days of lunch with OpenSauced.
That's right. So this is our course, and I do this every time. I am making the wrong screen bigger.
I do that every day. I'm always like, all right, no, wrong one. Hold on.
Every time we've streamed, I've done it. Here's our course. So I want to give a big shout out to IU and to Jessica Wilkins for their help and support in developing this course. And so initially, I think I kind of had an outline drafted for it. And we have our intro to contributing course. And we felt pretty good about that. And we've had, at least over 100 people go through that course, complete that course. And we felt like, okay, we're ready probably for something else. We're ready to help them on the next stage of their journey because, we don't want to leave them hanging. And this felt like a really good place to kind of pick up what we were doing. And we were trying to think from our own experiences, what has been helpful to us. And so we have all of these different chapters right now, but the first thing is like understanding like what does it even mean to be a maintainer, and there's all this vocabulary that you don't know until you know it, and like we wanted to be the ones to help you to know it. So and like what do they even do, because it can be really unclear. Like, do you write code? Do you review PRs? Who's in charge of the community? Who's in charge of the documentation? Like what does a maintainer do? Because it feels like maybe they're doing everything. And
those
in a lot of cases, that's
feel like
true.
They never, it is true, right? Like, what do you do? And the answer is yes. And a lot of maintainers, if you ask them, they might feel like they sort of fell into it too. Like, oh, just all of a sudden my project got popular and I was maintaining it and I started getting PRs from people and it was exciting. And then before I knew it, I had, a couple dozen, a couple hundred, and at no point did they go, I guess I should learn about this. So when you talk to a maintainer that's like that, they're often like, I don't know what I'm doing. And this is a perfect course for someone like that. They could start at 0. They could start at whatever chapter they really need help on in that moment.
Yeah, I actually was talking to someone who's been in tech for quite a bit of time, but he was creating his first open source project. In open source in the sense of he wanted collaborators, he wanted contributors. So, he has some repositories that are open, but never really sought to create it as an active open source project. And he was saying how challenging it was because there are so many different pieces that you don't realize or you don't know. So like, how do you approach these things? And so it doesn't mean you're brand new to tech. You can be. But also this can be useful if you've been in tech, but you've never maintained an open source project. And so this kind of gives a little bit of like an approach to how to do open source. And then the second part, no, thank you, walks through how to set up the project. So, there are certainly things that you need in your open source project to call it an open source project. And so we give kind of a high level overview. You always want to have that README there. But what does that mean? What should be in the README? This kind of gives you a checklist. We give you some examples that we think would be useful to you, an installation guide. So for your projects, if someone is running the project, how do they install it? How do they get it running on their computer? We talk about open source software licenses, which that's, I think, like some of the biggest questions and can be really challenging. And it's going to differ for everyone, but I feel like there's some basic ones that folks use. I think MIT might be like default on most
I think
projects.
so, right? That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and we actually use Creative Commons for our education track. And so it's similar, but the idea is like we're out here just trying to educate people and help support them. And that provides, I think, like the leniency that's useful in this project.
I noticed the link there. Yeah, the legal side of open source within there too, talking about licenses. And I think that's something a lot of people do not consider, is that there really is like a lot to think about when it comes to these licensing. It really affects the direction that you're heading. And so maybe you default to MIT, as a lot of people do, but it's important to know that there's options. It's not just the MIT license. And if you're really feeling yourself, go ahead and make your own, I guess. But like, honestly, there's so many out there that there's probably one for you that fits your use case, you know?
Yeah, and we've seen a lot, actually, like quite a few big companies in the last year change their license, right? And that's caused a lot of stir in the open source community.
I like that you said stir. Like that was
Yeah,
the best way I've ever
I'm not
seen
sure
it
if I
put.
should just like directly call anybody out, but we've also seen when folks have changed their license. So a lot of it had to do with getting paid to use their product. And so the companies changed their license and said, hey, at whatever point you have to start paying for it, or you have to start paying for it now. And it was interesting to see how that impacted other open source projects or people forking that repository so they can maintain their own copy or do things like, there's other technologies that we saw like jump in popularity after that happened because people were exploring, what are the other options we have that are out there. So it's made for an interesting year, I think.
Very interesting year. And from some open source titans in a way where we saw some very interesting changes. So as a maintainer, something to consider that I've been on the MIT the whole time because that's what everyone did. And like there is not that there's a shift, but it does feel like we're now looking at these other licenses and saying, well, how do we do this? What's the benefit? And if you're just looking at the titles of them on your GitHub, it's like, hey, pick a license and you got your drop-down menu. It can be overwhelming to be like, what's the reason? This sounds like a great resource for someone who's trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and this is actually one of the things that we talk about in the course, effective communication and collaboration. And so I think it's important to bring this up. It's a great skill to have, but in a lot of those instances where license change happened, the way it was communicated to people, I think, fell short. And that's what caused a lot of the outrage, or there wasn't feedback that was asked for in advance. And so we felt that it was very important, not just to teach you the basics, like there's this checklist. Yeah, you should definitely have a code of conduct. What should be in there? What are your project standards? There are a lot of checklists out there, and I think that they're good. They help people get started. Maybe we can come back to this, but I just do want to talk about how important it is to effectively communicate and collaborate with others, because that's a huge part of the process. And if you're in an interview, most likely they're going to ask you a question that starts with, tell me about a time when, and it could be like, you had to communicate something that was hard to communicate, or you found something challenging, or you disagreed with someone at work. Well, it can be really hard if people are asking you to talk about an experience that you don't have any related work experience. So when you have an open source project, you can actually directly point to that. Like, oh, here's issue number 543, and I'll link you directly to the comment. This is where the challenge started. This is how I dealt with that challenge. And you get better as time goes on. But all of these things help you to figure out how to communicate with your community, how to enhance the community experience, and how to engage with your contributors.
Yeah. These kinds of guides are so valuable too, because it's a wealth of information. And yeah, you can read it top to bottom and come away having learned more and experienced more. But a lot of the value is in, I'm having this particular issue right now. I don't know where to start. And coming here and having a place where it talks about just communication. Like if you feel like your communication's breaking down, heading here and knowing that there's a whole section on it, how to engage with contributors, how to manage expectations. Like these are things that a lot of people don't just naturally know. You learn over time. And so if you can take the time to learn from Bekah and OpenSauced and BekahHW and all these amazing people whose whole job right now is making open source better for everyone and easier to get into and easier to understand. It's amazing what information is out there and how quickly you can learn and understand these concepts, because the way y'all put them out there and the way you outline them is easy to understand and just well put together. And I know that about you, Bekah, because, you know, former English teacher, we're stuck making good content out here for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, you know, it lends itself to teaching and learning. And actually, one of the things that I wrote about in the blog post, I mentioned, I can't remember how I put it, but it was essentially like share your wisdom with other people. So as you're learning these things, talk about them too, because if you're starting as a new maintainer, you can help mentor other people or share your wisdom with them and be a teacher as well. And if you can show that you are a teacher in some way or a mentor, like what an amazing skill to be able to talk about on your resume or on a cover letter or in an interview.
Yep. Ah, man. And that ability to just point directly to the evidence is so powerful and something that a lot of people have a hard time with, even in real jobs when it comes time for like evaluations or reflections or anything like that. Sitting and talking about what you've done can be really difficult. But when you've got a specific, oh, I remember when we had this problem, we created an issue, and in the end, it really worked out. I can literally link this recruiter, this manager, this person to that and show them what I've done. And heck, even like we were talking about getting into jobs and how this can work as an internship. But even for people who are already working, the stuff you're doing in open source can show the work that it can be tied to the work you do for your job, for your career too. And you can use that to like build your career continually. It's not just at the beginning, it can keep going afterwards.
Yeah, for sure. And there have definitely been conversations I've had over the last couple years with other people who are also in open source related positions. And I'll say like, oh yeah, when I do this, I use a saved reply to save my time. And they're like, what's a saved reply? I've never heard of that, right? And like, I only heard about it because I think Jessica Wilkins told me that she uses it during Hacktoberfest, you know? And so like, as we spread this information, we also spread our network. And so, you know, I share it with someone else, they get excited about it. And then they also know like Bekah is the person that told me. And it, you know, that expands your network. It shows your credibility and also like helps to set up your reputation essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, you're like, oh, like I learned it from, you said Jessica Wilkins?
Wilkins, yeah.
Yeah, you're like, I learned it from Jessica Wilkins. Everyone on this stream now just learned it from you. So the future conversation is going to be like, oh, Bekah from OpenSauced had this great idea. But that's how knowledge travels. And for the 17 people currently watching, you heard it here first. Bekah's got the advice. And now you go on and you say, oh, Bekah from OpenSauced told me about this. It's amazing. These saved replies, you got to start using them. Yeah, it's these little tiny tools and tips and tricks that you don't learn until you're in it. And that's the kind of stuff that you're gathering in these guides. So you don't have to wait for someone to tell you now. The information's here for you to come and read.
Yeah, for sure. It's like one of my personal goals this year to become a GitHub power user. So I am able to share these things with other people and be like, look at this. This was an amazing thing that I didn't even know was available to me.
I too am hoping to learn how to use GitHub this year, finally, as an employee. And to be fair, I think it's relatively new. We've started using some like issue like forums, and I'm like,
love issue
this
forms.
Is cool. These issue forms, first off, they look great. And then the first time you open the YAML file for it, you look and you go, whoa, that's complicated. But it's actually not. I was able to add to a form the other day. It took me 5 minutes. So
I just have a request for, I would like PR forms as well. We have PR templates, but I would really like a PR form. So if you've got some sway.
All right, if anyone at GitHub is listening, oh wait, that's me. Yeah, I guess I gotta talk to someone about that. No, that would be great. That sounds.
I imagine there's gotta be a story why there are not PR forms, but I don't know the story.
Yeah, or I mean, I can't even speculate here. I imagine it was like, check out issue forms, and I'm sure someone internally has said the same thing, Bekah. So either it's being worked on, which I don't know, or it was considered and there's a reason not, which either way, I'd love to hear the story about it. Like, we should talk to some people working on issues, maybe live on stream sometime. Morgan, we'll do that. We'll get people on stream talking about just internal stuff next time. But Bekah, tell us more like about this. It's so huge. Like, if you just tell us, If you told us one thing about everything in here, we wouldn't be done within the hour. We'd be here too long. So what's some more stuff we got here for maintainers that they can learn about?
Yeah, I would say, like, first of all, make sure, like, don't go through this course and say, like, I have to have all these things. Again, this is to help you be aware of it. And there's plenty of times when you're learning something where you can just put it in the back of your head and say, I know I'm going to need that in the future. I know where I can find it, but I don't need to be overwhelmed with it right now. That's a totally valid way to approach some of this stuff, because we do have maintainer power-ups, which is one of my favorite sections, where it talks to you about creating a GitHub Actions. What is a GitHub Action? What do you do with GitHub Actions? Deployed previews. Love deployed previews. They're my favorite. When they don't work, they are not my favorite. So thumbs
but
down
they always
to
work.
Bekah. And it just helps you to just be more efficient. Yeah, so there's lots of information. Like I said, I don't think you necessarily need all this. GitHub CLI, that's a game changer. Being able to review PRs using the GitHub CLI makes life so much quicker and so much easier. I highly recommend that if you are getting contributions from people who are forking your repository and going about it that way, because I find it to be a much quicker experience than doing it any other way. So if there's something in this section where you're like, I'm very new, what should I focus on? GitHub CLI, and issue and pull request templates. So issue forms and pull request sub templates.
And issue templates feels like if I were a maintainer, it'd be the very first thing I did was be like, I need this information in this format. Because if all you have people submitting are blank issues, it just gets overwhelming really quickly, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And it also helps if you have new contributors, because a lot of times somebody that's new to an open source project is not really sure what information they should be including. So by providing them with an issue form and a PR template, it directs them and gives them a little bit more information that they need to stay focused, not just like fixed typo. Like, all right, where did you fix the typo? Did you just decrease the white space that's there, you know?
I've removed one piece of white space. Please give me my Hacktoberfest badge.
Yep.
It's very important. That's expectation setting. That's, if you want to do this, here's how to do it. And I think that so much of the way we learn in tech and in open source and in this world is just kind of by like doing what we see other people doing. So if you show up at a repo and everyone's doing something a certain way, you're gonna pick up on that. And the only way to make sure everyone's doing it a certain way is to set that expectation up as a maintainer.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also showcases that you're able to think about other people that you're collaborating with as well, which I think is really important. So it's about your project, but ultimately it's about being able to work with your collaborators and your contributors.
Absolutely. So here, this section on just code owners. Contributors don't know the maintainer, so they don't know how to reach out to. So a code owner's file defines people who are responsible and puts a place where people can find out and know exactly who to talk to. Which, I mean, how many times have you shown up to an open source project and you're like, who do I even assign this to? Like, what do I do?
Yeah, and it makes it a lot easier for you too. So if you have multiple maintainers or people that can be reviewing PRs, then those people will get automatic notifications like, hey, there's a PR that needs to be reviewed here. And so rather than saying like, Bekah, Pj, Morgan, like all of you need to be tagged in this thing.
All 8 people, come in here. Please observe this PR I have for removing white space.
Yeah, and it also makes sense if you're creating teams. We do talk about creating teams. Again, one of those things that you don't necessarily need at the very beginning. But I do know some new maintainers out there who have like a docs team. And it makes it easier if you add teams to be able to manage the group of people there, to know whether or not they are actively maintaining the project or helping with that. If you have 10 people on the docs team, it can be hard to keep track of how many people are active and have extra permissions, because when you create a team, you can give them extra permission, and you don't want to, if you are individually giving everyone different permission, it can be really hard to kind of navigate that and make it easier for you to even manage a team. So it's beyond managing contributors, you're managing teams as well. And there are a lot of like great power-ups that will make that easier for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Super important to really understand the variety of tools that GitHub has that exist to make being a maintainer a little bit easier, and being an administrator of your project or of your team or of your org or whatever level you're talking about. All these tools are designed to make life a little bit easier, and that's kind of, I feel like that would be the hardest part about maintaining, is really knowing what's all available to you. But I don't know, it looks like this whole course has it all covered for us.
Yeah, we do actually. Here's a whole chapter on setting up your team. So if you're like, what does that even mean and why? We go through some common teams, why you might want to want to create those teams, and then how you can do that. So hopefully this can help folks understand, especially as they're growing. So you can kind of grow into this course as well.
Yeah, a lot of times it's hard to feel like you're gonna make it when you have a question about like, oh, how do I do XYZ? And taking that and being able, seeing the other questions that comes out of it can be really like almost like debilitating. You're like, oh, I got this question, let me find an answer real quick. And then you come out with 5 more questions than you found answers. I keep saying it, this document and this course it feels like it's covering a lot of bases. And yes, scouting for superpower. Bekah, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So sometimes when you're looking for new people to help you out, people to add to your teams, it's really important to think about it from the perspective of, hey, you don't want to just ask some random person in your community, want to be on this team, right? I can tell you that if you do that, it's probably going to create a lot more work for you, right?
Yeah.
And it's not fair to the other person to just be like, I now expect you to do all of these things. So when you're scouting for superpowers, what that means is look at the strengths that other people have in your community or in other communities as well. So you don't have to ask somebody that is familiar with your project, but if you know, like, we need to start running office hours and putting our events on our site. You might say PJ is really good at that, and he's not part of our project, but maybe I can talk to him about being part of our project, or maybe he has recommendations for somebody that might do a really good job of helping us out with this. And so it's really like looking at your community, looking at the open source community in general, and like finding the right person that can help you and also has the time and availability. Because I will also say that usually people want to help, but the biggest impediment is that they don't have the time. And they feel guilty saying no. And so it's important to say like, hey, if you don't have the time right now, that's totally fine. This is the commitment that we're looking for. And I think that we do outline here, asking someone, inviting your team. So it goes a little bit more in depth about how you might want to invite someone to your team. But I think we have how you can ask them and give an example from there. Onboarding new team members. So all of these things have to kind of be taken into account. And again, like if we're talking resumes, if we're talking about experience, this is another great piece of experience to have. Look, I was able to identify these people with these strengths and to onboard them as part of my team. This was the onboarding process that I came up with, and this is how it impacted my team. That's amazing.
It's the kind of thing that normally you don't get experience with unless you have been working a job for a while and you're in like a people manager position. You can get similar experience with proof of what you built, made, created, engaged with. Like, all of this can happen inside open source. I think that it's this whole world that exists that so many people just truly don't realize it's offering some of these same benefits that these internships do. And beyond that, even beyond that.
Sorry, I was like checking out. I had totally lost the chat, and I just want to make sure that if there are any other questions that we answered those.
Oh yeah, we're keeping an eye on it. Don't worry. We got scouting for superpowers, the most recent thing.
All right.
Onboarding is so important, and really, most of my open source experience was with a group called the Good Docs Project, who seeks to make amazing documentation that can give you templates that you can use when you're looking, how do I make documentation? And they're an excellent group. They're really cool. But as I was coming into GitHub, I had to step away and be like, oh, I can't work on this anymore. I'm onboarding to a new job. But their onboarding process was great. We had like a welcome call. They talked about the different roles, the different teams. They said, which one interests you? You can always switch later. And it was very well structured. And I think a lot of people think of open source as being, oh, you show up and you just kind of do it. It was a job. I had a call I had to show up to. I had to agree to a team. I had stuff I had to do. And even though it was only, I think the most work I did for them in a week was maybe like 2 hours a week, I still needed all that information ahead of time in order to be able to do those 2 hours a week. So it's either have a plan for onboarding, or you're going to have people who literally can't do it. I never would have been able to contribute if I didn't have those onboarding calls.
Yeah, it definitely takes a lot of work and practice too. So you might start with an onboarding procedure and find that, okay, I keep getting these questions. That's a good time to update your onboarding, right? See where people are unsure or unclear about things, and also be willing to change things, be willing to reevaluate, because open source projects are like, they are living. They're not stagnant. They're going to change, especially with the people that are a part of them.
Yeah. We got a request from ourselves. The Let's Get Practical module. Yeah. Well, how do you actually start? What do you have to do?
Yeah, so this really walks you through the basics of starting your first project. And so it talks you through starting with a GitHub account. And it walks you through an example project. So we kind of have like an idea there. So let's see. We're going to create a repository about your favorite open source resources. So this is going to be a no-code repository. It's going to be marked down as an example, and it walks you through how to create that repository, the things that you can select, sample information, how to add documentation. So we have README. You can look at the markdown here and pretty much copy and paste a lot of the stuff if you want to. Contributing guidelines, there's a template there, code of conduct. It walks you through how to create that. We felt that issue forms and PR templates were very important, so we did include those as well. And we've got like a little checklist for you, but then we also have a copy of what we're doing at OpenSauced. Because I find that, you know, sometimes you have a checklist, but you're like, how do I write this thing? And especially when you're looking at, so this is a bug report issue. So there's a process for creating the template. But if you look at this YAML file, if I walked you through how to do it without giving you an example, it might be confusing because most of us are not writing like this on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So I nearly always copy somebody else's bug report or their GitHub action and then modify it for what I need it to be. So I'm a big fan of being able to see examples.
I mean, how often have you been like, all right, I got to make a README, and you're kind of just staring at this semi-blank like code file, and you're like, what do I need to put here? Having this to just copy paste and adjust as you want. And I know, Bekah, you probably know this, and I need everyone in the world to know this about educators. That's how I made all my presentations too. If I was lecturing about like, what did I lecture about a lot? Post-World War II, postmodernist literature. the first thing I did, I know about it. I can have a conversation about it. I just went and found some other teacher who had already made a presentation. They're like, oh, here's a presentation I did. Take it. Just grab that, edit what I need, add in my own references. Boom, I'm started. That's way easier than opening up Google Slides and staring at a blank white canvas, not knowing where to start.
Yeah, I remember right after I started the virtual coffee community, I was asking a friend, hey, what should I do now that I have like this community? And she was like, well, you should have a code of conduct. And I was like, what's a code of conduct? Number one, I didn't know. And number two, how do you make one? And it did start like with a blank open doc. And I'm like, what do you even put in a code of conduct?
What do I say?
And then I talked to someone else and they were like, oh, no, you don't need to write your own code of conduct. Here are 5 really good examples. Check them out, see what works for you. Just make sure that you provide attribution. And so for an issue template, I don't think you need to provide attribution.
I don't know. If you want to throw a comment at the top, it's like, I got this from OpenSauced. Here's a link. I'm sure.
Yeah, we won't be mad about that.
But yeah, I mean, attribution is almost all anyone wants. If it's up on the internet for free and they're saying, here, take it, then take it, use it, and then say thank you by including a comment about who it came from. Like that's the spirit of open source love. Yeah, you gotta give attribution to the author. Say where you got it from. That's how you say thank you in open source. You say, this is where I got it from.
And it also helps other people too. It lets them know like, okay, I'm going to go check out that code of conduct, or I'm definitely going to take a look at these different samples. And also now I know that I don't have to create it myself. If this big project is taking their code of conduct from someone else, then I know that there's room for me to be able to do that as well. So I think at least for the virtual coffee code of conduct, it's at the bottom. It says this code of conduct has been, this is a modified version of whatever code of conduct that we initially went through. And then we personalized it for our specific community because that was important to us. So
exactly. So cool. Oh man, all of this stuff, you could literally have 0 today, go and grab this course, and you could have a full open source project in like a week. I mean, you need the code still. Like, what are you actually writing? But
yeah, and if you just want to start easy, or I shouldn't say easy, if you want to start without having to put much thought into the project, you can walk through this example. Again, it's a markdown repository. And we also have, we have this maintainer's guest book. I guess I need to merge in that PR. So there will be some projects here because I have an open PR about that, but you can add your project to this list. And if you do complete the course and create an issue, it will show you how to add yourself to the guest book. So there are directions that are written in the repository for how to be able to do that.
Wow. This is an extremely robust and well done course, Bekah. How long have y'all been working on this?
I don't know.
Is it forever?
It's been a little while, but it's been a process of talking through things, working at it, reviewing it, and doing it at a pace that felt okay for everybody that was working on it, because we're all working on lots of different things and different projects, and so we wanted to be able to get it right. So it took a while for us to be able to get it out there, but it's because we wanted to do it justice. We wanted to make sure that we took our time and to come up with something that we are proud of. And so, I think it is. And hopefully we'll see some maintainers adding their courses here. And then we can also recognize you. And that's the plan. So, if your course is added here, or if your repository is added here, then we can shout you out and say hey, great job on this. Everybody check out this new project.
Yeah. Shout out to come and check it out. That's right, Bekah. Did you know you were an influencer?
I'm not an influencer, but thank you.
I wish I could be an influencer. I don't have the patience for it. So this course really takes you from even just understanding maintainership, like that's a course maintainers don't get. Like at no point in some of the most popular open source libraries, it's likely that they never truly learned in a course like this. They just learned over time. And so now it's time to take what they know and what all these people have learned and know and what successful open source projects do, and it's available to anyone now. You just got to go to OpenSauced and read this.
Yeah, sorry, I was looking at the chat.
Yeah.
What would you recommend teaching folks who are getting started in open source but don't know Git? Do you recommend we give them the GitHub desktop app or teach them through the CLI? That's a good question. I do use the GitHub desktop app a lot to teach folks how to do things. The CLI would work too. I'm currently working on a blog post with AppWrite that's kind of taking you from not knowing that much all the way up to like being ready to contribute to open source. And there is a section on learning how to use Git. And actually, there are two resources that I want to recommend. One is Chantastic. Michael Chan has one on the Epic Web course, free courses. And then the second one is Amy Dutton from Redwood JS has a YouTube course as well. So I think that both of these things it's important to learn how to use Git, right? Everybody will. Well, there are some people out there that say that you don't have to learn it. I think it's important to learn it. At the very least, if you're collaborating with other people, it's useful to know how to use Git.
I mean, but understanding how things are saved feels like you gotta know that. And if you're gonna be on GitHub doing open source, like you have to know at least push pull, right? Like a little bit. So I think you gotta know it. It's 2024. I think it's really important, but I also know that it can feel like a huge mystery to people and feel overwhelming to people.
Yeah, and it's the same kind of thing as becoming a maintainer, I think, as well, because there are things that you don't need to know initially. You can learn the basics, and you can be okay with that for a really long time. You don't necessarily have to know all of these very in-depth commands or obscure things. You know, I've learned some great things about Git over the last year that people have shared, and it's the same thing, like, oh, saved replies, I never knew about that. It was like the same thing, like, oh, you can do that with Git? I didn't know that, right? And it's just that knowledge that I know who I can talk to about that thing, or I know that there are more options out there and that I'm not stuck with you know, pull and push.
Yeah. I've always thought that fetch was kind of a fun one. I like running fetch once in a while just to see what's going on upstream.
Just
what's
checking it out.
I just want to see. Don't do anything though. I just want to take a peek. Another question from DevHarsh. Could you please explain a little about the difference between MIT and Apache licenses and projects?
Yeah, I would say this is one of those questions that I would say check out what the resources that we have in the course, because with a lot of these licenses, there's some nuance there. And rather than talking about it, I think that it's important to be able to make sure that we're really accurate with that stuff. So go ahead, check that out in the course. And if it's still unclear, create an issue, and then we can hopefully make that clear or provide more resources to help you find the answer.
That's actually this is not legal advice. That's a really good point. And that is this maintainer's course open source, Bekah? Is this something that people can contribute issues to?
Yeah, absolutely. You can give us a little star here on GitHub if you so choose. But we also have the intro to open source course. And then if you click the little, look how cute it is. It wags its tail, the little GitHub OctoKitty. I'm only sharing my tab, so I can't show you. But if you click little OctoKitty, it will take you to our GitHub page for both of our courses.
That's fantastic. That's really living the spirit, Bekah. That's turns out OpenSauced is really doing this very well, aren't they?
We're trying.
That's right. We're getting towards the end of our hour, and Bekah, I am just first off, it's been a a dream of mine since I entered tech and I found out that you existed, that we would get to collaborate on something, former teacher to former teacher. And I'm extremely inspired by what you've been doing out there. And it really drives me to try and be better. So thank you for saying yes to being on this. Thank you, OpenSauced, for just the absolute wealth of information about working in open source that y'all are putting out there. Are there any final thoughts? Anything you really want to share at the end of this?
Yeah, so this is also linked in the course somewhere. We might have talked about this in the past, but we do have a job seeker's guide to open source. So it can help you translate the things that you've been working on to your resume. So maybe we could drop that in the chat there as well. I think that's important. If you have questions, if you have feedback, always here for that. And in about 7 minutes, I'm going to be live streaming with Nick Taylor, my teammate, and IU, who helped create the course, to talk more about the course and what went into that and to answer some questions. So if you want to know more, if you want to hear us talk about this even more, then you can check us out. We'll be on YouTube, X, and LinkedIn.
Wow. And here we are only streaming to Twitch. No, sounds like no matter where you are on the internet, you're gonna be able to see this this OpenSauced stream coming up in 7 minutes. Ooh, Bekah, this is a long afternoon for you over there on the East Coast, huh?
I've been drinking a lot of cold brew today, so
I bet. Yeah, I'm only on my first cup of coffee, but I only have one stream, so I guess that's how it goes, right? Well, Bekah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, thanks so much for having me. I think this has been really great, and I really appreciate being able to talk through this with you and to join in this education.
Please understand the pleasure is all mine and ours. For those of you who are out there wondering, well, what's GitHub Education going to do next? We are going to continue to stream on here, and I believe we've got another show coming up in June with DevCycle. My very good friend, Andrew McLean, will be joining us for that. More information on that on our social media. Check us out, GitHub Education on Twitter. You'll see upcoming streams there. Make sure you are following us here. You don't have to subscribe to the channel. Don't pay us to subscribe. Just follow us and show up when we're on stream. And please, please, please keep an eye on this space and keep an eye on OpenSauced. They are absolutely crushing it right now. And they're going to give you what you need in order to up-level and upskill your own open source adventure. Bekah, thank you so much. Morgan in the back, thank you for the awesome production today. You made my life a lot easier. I didn't have to click around and do all this stuff myself. It was very easy. And everyone should absolutely go and check out this next stream. YouTube, Twitter, X, and LinkedIn. Find OpenSauced and get there and do it. Oh yeah, DevHarsh, turn on notifications. What is it? Smash the bell, baby. And I guess we'll be back next time. Bekah, thank you. Morgan, thank you. Everyone in the chat, thank you very much. Go and watch this way. Bekah's stream, OpenSauced stream, live, LinkedIn, X, YouTube. See you next time, y'all.